What if I told you that your addiction is not a curse, but a language, a secret way through which God speaks to his chosen souls? Carl Gustav Jung made a discovery so profound and daring that official religion could not accept it. He claimed, addiction is not weakness, not a mistake, and not a disease in the usual sense. It is a whisper of a higher power, striving to awaken in a person what has long been asleep in their soul. While most see addiction as punishment, Jung regarded it as a spiritual dialogue, a difficult, painful, yet deeply personal conversation between a person and God. The endless craving, the feeling of guilt, the obsession, the repeating cycle of falls and rebirths. None of this is accidental. It is the language through which fate speaks to you. Every addiction carries a message, a hidden code meant only for those mature enough to hear it. Alcohol, lust, the urge for control, ambition, pain. None of this is chaos or random passion. These are symbols of hunger, signs that your soul has lost connection with what was once sacred to it. And only souls marked by a higher purpose feel this inner fire with such unquenchable intensity. Have you ever felt as if you were trapped in a cage of your own desires, yet unable to let them go? This paradox is not punishment, but evidence. Jung wrote, "The more fiercely a person fights what they crave, the further they move away from the meaning hidden within that very craving." Addiction does not come to destroy you. It comes to reveal you. God speaks through the storm of your impulses, through urges you do not understand, and in the particular silence after each fall, when you no longer recognize yourself. It is precisely in that moment that reconstruction begins. Before condemning your addiction, try to listen to it. It may be the most intimate conversation with God that has ever taken place in your life, and only those destined for awakening are able to hear it. There is a hunger within you that nothing can satisfy. You try to fill it with substances, people, success, entertainment. But no matter how much you consume, the emptiness returns, deeper, more insistent, almost alive. Carl Gustav Jung called this state spirit against spirit, when a person unconsciously seeks a spiritual experience through material or destructive forms. He believed that every addiction is a distorted prayer, a search for the sacred in a world where the sacred has been lost. When you reach for the bottle, for pleasure, for danger, you are not simply weak. You are responding to a call you have not yet learned to recognize. Your soul demands meaning, and addiction becomes the only language it can speak. This hunger is ancient. It has accompanied humanity from the very beginning, but it is not given equally to all. There are souls destined to search more deeply, to suffer more intensely, to feel more unbearably. Jung called them marked by a divine restlessness, those who cannot settle for a superficial life. Most people can drink without becoming dependent, can enjoy without losing themselves in pleasure. But if you cannot, it is not weakness. It is a sign that something greater seeks to speak through you. The insatiable thirst is not a punishment, but a call to transformation, one you may resist because you are afraid to see your true face. Jung saw in alcoholics, addicts, and people consumed by ambition, individuals carrying a particular spiritual wound. He understood they are not seeking alcohol, power, or pleasure. They are seeking God. Even if unconsciously, they are trying to touch something transcendent, a realm where the breath of meaning still exists. And so they drink, to feel a living connection, to sense themselves as existing, to restore, if only for a moment, the lost taste of divine magic in this soulless, mechanical world. But here is where the true turning point occurs. The very addiction that seems like a bridge to healing becomes a wall. The thing you use to quench your thirst is the very thing that prevents it from being quenched. You drink to become whole, yet with every sip you shatter yourself into fragments. You seek pleasure to silence pain, but that very pleasure becomes the source of new pain. Thus, a closed loop is formed, a paradox. as if carefully designed to strip you of illusions. However, as Carl Gustav Jung wrote, there is no chaos in this. It is neither a curse nor an accident. It is a spiritual mechanism, precise and merciless, created not for destruction, but for purification. It is a trial passed only by those whose souls are strong enough to endure the truth about themselves. God does not speak to everyone through addiction. Not everyone is meant to receive such a language. But if it is through this that He speaks to you, know that the message is always the same. What you seek outside can only be found within. The thirst you feel is real. It is not an illusion, not a whim, nor a weakness. It is the call of the soul, but you have directed it the wrong way. You have tried to satisfy a spiritual hunger with material means. You have tried to fill an abyss of meaning with things, people, sensations, power, recognition. But the shape of this void is divine, and nothing earthly will fit into it. Each time you reach again for an external source, the hole grows wider, the thirst sharper, and you feel increasingly alone and emptied. And yet, within this lies a kind of grace. For only the one who has realized the futility of the external path is finally able to turn inward. Addiction breaks you, but within its ruins, something whole can be born. When everything external stops working, the encounter begins with what in you cannot be destroyed, with your true self. This is the point where most people give up. They look at the endless cycle of falls and rises and draw the familiar conclusion: I am broken, I am cursed, I am unworthy. But Carl Gustav Jung saw something entirely different in this. He understood that the strength of your craving is directly proportional to the depth of your calling. The greater the suffering, the higher the potential for awakening. The thirst that cannot be quenched is not a punishment. It is preparation, a divine tempering of the soul before its encounter with truth. God speaks to His chosen through an impossible thirst, because only through it can the most important truth be realized. Nothing in the external world will ever be enough. Not success, not love, not power, not pleasure, nothing. And when this realization ceases to be just a phrase and becomes your inner experience, when you stop fighting and begin to listen, the thirst changes its form. It ceases to be a drive to fill yourself and becomes a drive to free yourself. It ceases to be escape and becomes an encounter. The thirst that once led you to destruction becomes a door into another world, a world where the source is not outside, but within. There you feel not emptiness, but presence. There you understand that all this time God was not silent. He was calling you. But as long as you struggle, you do not hear. As long as you drown in guilt and shame, you cannot understand that pain is not an enemy, but a signpost. The first thing to do is to accept that addiction is not a monster, but a teacher, your guide in the dark, the very thorn in the flesh that will not let you fall asleep spiritually until you turn inward and face what you have been running from your entire life. The thirst will never be satisfied by anything external, and that is its blessing, because it is not meant to be satisfied. It is meant to awaken. The thirst is a call, the craving is an invitation, and your addiction is the only force powerful enough to finally make you respond. You have tried to quit 1,000 times. You made promises to yourself, to others, perhaps even to God, each time sincerely, with the hope that now everything would be different. And yet you kept falling again and again. Each relapse became a verdict for you, a proof of your weakness, your brokenness, your supposed hopelessness. But what if falling is not the opposite of rising? What if every collapse is a step forward in a journey whose meaning you are not yet able to see? Carl Gustav Jung believed that the repeating cycle of addiction and relapse is not a sign of defeat, but an inevitable descent into the depths of your psyche that you have avoided your entire life. He called this the encounter with the shadow. The shadow is your dark side, all that you deny, repress, and lock away in the depths of your mind. anger, fear, guilt, shame, jealousy, insatiable desires, everything you are afraid to acknowledge within yourself. But addiction has a peculiar, almost sacred property. It brings all of this to the surface. Every fall, every moment of shame, every "I relapsed again" is not only pain, it is revelation. You come face to face with a truth about yourself that you would never have seen if life had remained smooth and controlled. A dependent person cannot hide behind masks. It strips everything away: social roles, propriety, justifications. And at some point you are left alone, with yourself, with life, with God. And in that exposure lies the essence of the process. Most people go through life without ever discovering who they truly are. They build false identities, live for approval, for safety, and never meet their soul face to face. But those marked by addiction cannot avoid this encounter. They are compelled to descend into the underworld of their own psyche, whether they want to or not. Each fall is a step deeper. Each crisis is an invitation inward, to the place where what Jung called the self resides, the center where the true I lives. Jung knew this is not a failure, not a mistake, but an initiation. All great myths tell this story. The hero must descend into darkness, into the cave, into hell, into the heart of their shadow, before they can rise toward the light. They must face the monsters that seem external, but are in fact reflections of their own soul. And only by passing through this darkness do they discover their true strength. Only after encountering the shadow is one capable of rebirth. Your addiction is your underworld. Each relapse is another layer stripped away from you, another illusion destroyed, another false identity exposed and dismantled. It feels like death, and in a sense that is exactly what it is. But death is not the end. Death is a gateway. It is the beginning of transformation. It is precisely where you feel most lost that God speaks to you most clearly. Your falls are not random. They follow a pattern, a rhythm that Carl Gustav Jung described as the spiritual alchemy of the soul. You rise with hope, fall into despair, rise again with determination, and fall again, this time with guilt. Again and again, each cycle carries a lesson, a repeated attempt by the soul to show you something you are not yet willing to see. And the cycle continues until you realize one simple yet devastating truth. You cannot save yourself by willpower alone. You will not overcome addiction through discipline, control, or logic. This is the greatest paradox for the strong. Most of you are fighters. You are used to winning, enduring, never giving up. But addiction does not submit to force. It feeds on it. The harder you fight, the tighter it holds you. The more fiercely you resist, the deeper its roots grow. Because addiction is not an enemy, it is a trial that requires a different kind of strength, the strength of surrender. Surrender is not defeat. It is the recognition that you have encountered something greater than your ego, something that demands humility, not struggle. It is the moment of truth when you first say, "I cannot do this alone. I need help. I am ready to go inward." The path forward is not upward, but downward. Not into the light of illusion, but into the darkness of truth. Deeper into the unconscious. Further into the unknown. Where what awaits you is not an enemy, but a revelation. You descend to where the parts of you lie, that you have been running from your entire life. And it is there, in the depths of your underworld, that the ascent begins. Jung observed that those who truly free themselves from addiction do so not through victory, but through integration. They stop waging war against their shadow, stop seeing it as an enemy, and begin to recognize it as a part of themselves, a wounded, rejected part that longs not to be destroyed, but to be understood. They stop fighting the fall and begin to learn from it. Each fall ceases to be a catastrophe and becomes a lesson. Each relapse becomes a mirror in which what is reflected is not your weakness, but your humanity. Every time you collapse, you are given a gift, a chance to see yourself more clearly, to understand why you crave what you crave, why you run from what you run from, and why your pain resonates in precisely this way. With each fall, if you are not blinded by guilt but are willing to look, you move closer to a truth that will one day set you free. This path is not a straight ascent, it is a spiral. It descends into darkness in order to rise again into light. There is a part of you that is always watching, from the corner of your awareness, from a silent depth where the gaze of God and the gaze of your soul coincide. It knows everything, every secret you hide from others, every lie you use to comfort yourself, every moment of weakness you would rather forget. This is not conscience. Conscience judges, this simply sees. It is not a moral overseer, but an ancient witness of your true self. Carl Gustav Jung called it the shadow. It has been with you since birth, growing in silence, in every truth you repressed, in every feeling you refused to experience. Your addiction feeds on it. It breathes through what is hidden. It lives in the darkness of what you do not want to acknowledge. Suppressed rage, ungrieved pain, desires you chose to silence, shame you did not allow to speak. All of this descends downward, into that inner underworld where everything you turned away from is stored. And there it waits, gathering strength, until one day it bursts forth in forms you can no longer control. You think addiction is a manifestation of your weakness, but Jung saw it differently. He understood that addiction is the language of the shadow, its way of forcing you to finally see. It is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to be heard. It is trying to say, "Look at me. I am part of you. Do not reject me anymore." Because everything you refuse to face in the light will eventually come to you from the darkness. And if you do not illuminate it with awareness, it will consume you through its shadow. But if you dare to look, if you can withstand your own gaze, the shadow ceases to be a threat. It becomes a guide, not an enemy, but a bridge. And it is precisely this bridge that leads to where true freedom begins. Every craving carries a message from your shadow. When you reach for a drink, a substance, a destructive act, you are not seeking mere pleasure or simple escape. You are responding to the call of a part of yourself that has been silenced for too long. The part that holds truths you were afraid to acknowledge. The part that remembers who you are beneath all the masks you have so carefully constructed. Most people go through life without ever encountering their shadow. They arrange a comfortable existence, surround themselves with distractions, build external roles so as not to look too deeply into their own darkness. But God does not choose such people for this path. He chooses those who cannot escape, those whose shadows refuse to be forgotten, those whose inner darkness becomes so loud that it drowns out all external noise. That is why your addiction feels so powerful, so all-consuming, so impossible to resist. It is not merely a habit, nor simply a chemical dependency. It is your shadow demanding recognition. And the more you fight it, the more fiercely you condemn it, the more you hate yourself for it, the stronger it becomes, because shadows grow in proportion to the light you try to blind them with. Carl Gustav Jung made one of the most radical discoveries of the 20th century. You cannot destroy your shadow. It cannot be exorcised through prayer, subdued by discipline, or silenced by shame. The only way forward is integration. You must turn toward the darkness, meet its gaze, and call it by name. Acknowledge what you have denied for years. Accept the feelings you were ashamed of. Give voice to the parts of yourself you did not allow to exist. Because, as Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Anger, selfishness, fear, weakness, the craving for what you were taught to reject. This is difficult work. Work that requires not force, but courage. A courage most people will never be required to possess. Because when you finally dare to face your shadow, you will see everything you were taught to despise. You will see the monster you swore you would never become. You will see desires you were trained to silence. You will see truths that society, family, and religion instructed you to hide beneath the surface of your soul. And then you will face a choice. You can reject it all again. Turn away, run, hide deeper within your addiction. Or you can accept it. Accept it, and begin the process of transformation that constitutes true spiritual maturity. Those chosen for this burden are not chosen at random. God knows, not every person can confront their own shadow and survive. Not everyone can look into the abyss without being consumed by it. But those marked by addiction have no such option. Their shadow will not let them rest. It will push, destroy, take away, strip, raise them up again, and break them once more until they stop running and turn to face themselves. And when that happens, something unexpected occurs. The shadow does not destroy you, it reveals you, because within its depths lie gifts you never suspected, strengths you suppressed, talents you were ashamed of, truths you were afraid to speak. Carl Gustav Jung understood that the shadow holds your potential, your energy, your living essence. It knows who you are, without pretense, without masks, without fear. And when you stop seeing it as an enemy, when you allow it to become part of you, in that moment, addiction loses its power, because it is no longer needed. A shadow that has been integrated no longer needs to scream, no longer demands destruction, no longer calls through pain. You become whole, and a whole person no longer seeks salvation outside. They have found it within. Because addiction holds power only when you are divided within yourself, when one part of you wants to stop and another part cannot. When your mind says no and your shadow whispers yes, this inner war exhausts you. And it is precisely from this exhaustion that addiction draws its strength. But everything changes the moment you stop fighting yourself. When instead of struggle, you choose understanding. When you stop cursing your darkness, and for the first time, dare to listen to it. In that moment, the war ends. You stop being divided. You become whole. Carl Gustav Jung believed that this is the true goal of spiritual development, not perfection, not holiness, not becoming an idealized image created by society or religion, but wholeness. To become complete by accepting all parts of yourself, the light and the dark, the noble and the shameful. To understand that within you there are no enemies, only unheard parts of your soul waiting to be recognized. This is what it means to be truly human, not flawless, but whole. This, in Jung's view, is what God teaches his chosen through that harsh yet sacred classroom called addiction. Your shadow knows your name because it is you, the real you, whole, alive, undivided. Not the image you present to the world, not the role you have learned to play, but the one who exists beneath all layers of fear, shame, and conditioning. As long as you do not acknowledge it, as long as you do not dare to name it and accept it as part of yourself, freedom will remain out of reach. Because addiction will continue to exist as long as the shadow keeps knocking, demanding to finally be seen. But when you do this inner work, when you face what you have been running from your entire life, something remarkable happens. The craving that once controlled you transforms into a compass, pointing the way to your true self. The addiction that once destroyed you becomes a catalyst for your deepest transformation. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel.